In one of the previous movie, I talked about the code hoisting, which means you should not be using a variable and declare it later on. You should first be declaring it and then using it, or maybe at just the go, declare it at the same time and initialize it as well. And we'll be working on that in this video. Also, I'll be talking about some of the important aspects about the functions that has been upgraded here. Okay, so for that, let's just declare a function here and assume a scenario, which is going to be interesting. Let's just say you are building a weather app, and in that app, you are getting some data from a website, and now you need to compare that whether it's cold or not. So let's just define this, and obviously this is a virtual situation here. We are not getting any data from the website as of now. We may get it later on, but as of now we are not getting. We are just looking at a hypothetical situation, and we are trying to just code it. So let's just define a variable, and let's just call this as get data, because it might be getting data from the website. We are declaring a function, and there we go. This is the syntax here. Pretty simple, pretty cool. So this is the function. And as we have already seen, we can pass on some data or some parameters here like a comma b, but as I told you, a comma b is a bad choice of examples. Okay, and we'll come back here in a moment. And let's first define it here. Okay, so we are having two things, a temperature that we are getting from the website, and maybe we do have a cold parameter. So let me just define that. Let's just say I'm saying that 10 degrees Celsius is actually cold. So I'm setting one mark for myself that, hey, below this is going to be cold. Otherwise, it's not going to be so cold. Now, one thing you might have already noticed, now we can set some default values for the parameters, which is really great because it will allow you to write better code. This was needed, must needed in the JavaScript, and now it's there. And you can also define it here as well. Like for example, you want to say default temperature as 2 as well, then for sure you can do that. But it doesn't really make sense for our example. We have set a different situation. Okay. And now let's carry on. And if I declare, let's just create a hypothetical situation. If temperature is actually less than cold, simply cold there, and we're going to simply return a string that's going to say this is cold here. Okay, not very fancy. And in the else part, in the else part, we're going to simply return, let's just say this is not so cold. Okay, there we go. Nice and easy, no big deal so far. And obviously you might have assumed that what we have discussed here is pretty solid. Now, one more thing that you need to always take care about it. Let me just show you. Let's just say we are having some console.log, and we are going to have the get data function here. Okay, so this is our get data function. Right now, we are not passing any argument here. Obviously, it's expecting one argument to be passed to compare everything, but let's just see what happens when we don't pass anything. I run that, and it says this is not so cold because there was no value to be compared of, and that is why the null is being compared here, which is obviously less than that. But what happens when I pass something there? Let's just say, for example, 4. I pass a data there, the 4. Clear that. Run that, and it says this is cold here because 4 is less than 10. Okay, we got that, and we can also move on to 11 as well, or maybe 12. That's also acceptable. Pretty easy to understand that we're gonna get this is not so cold. Okay, pretty clear that. Now the interesting and important part is here, no matter what happens, listen it closely, no matter what happens, the parameter that you're going to pass, the first parameter is always going to set in the first value. I'll repeat it again. The first value is going to be set into the first parameter, no matter what happens. You may want to pass on the second argument as well. Let's just say, for example, 15. So what will happen now? This 12 will again get set to the first parameter. This 15 will get set here. So if there is already a default value, that's fine. It's going to override that. If there is no value, then it's going to set that value. Let me just clear that, run that. And maybe it would be much better if I just simply console.log, and I need to log the temp, and I'll also console.log log. This would be much better explanation so that you can understand which one is getting printed here. So clear that, run that, and we can see now 12 and 15 are actually being printed as temp and the code. So this is no more 10 because we are passing second argument there, and this is code here. That's unrelated there. But if I just delete that and clear that, run that, now obviously it's 10 because it's being set. And you can just work on with that. Like for example, if I just say like 2 here and don't pass anything, obviously now everything is being set already. We don't need to do anything. 2 and 10 is being printed. Okay, so that's how the default parameter works in the JavaScript. Again, make sure that you understand that no matter what happens, and even you might be thinking that, hey, if I just do something like this and I pass on like 10 in here, since this is already being set, this value is going to be set into the code. No, that's not gonna happen ever. That's not gonna happen. Let's just clear that, run that, and you can see 10 and undefined. This means the 2, the temperature, the 2 is being replaced by the 10, and cold is having no value. So I hope you get that. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the code hoisting as well. Like for example, let's just clear up the situation. Our cold is having a value of 10. We are passing in 10 here, or it doesn't really means here. Let's just say I am setting this value as simply cold there, and I'm gonna be deleting this. Now this is a perfect example of code hoisting. Now what is happening here? I'm trying to set the temperature value as a cold, but my cold is later on being defined as 10. Again, a typical example of code hoisting. And as I clear that, run that, everybody knows what's going to happen here. It's going to produce error because it's a typical example of code hoisting there. I hope you got my point again. Never ever do that. Always declare your variable first and then you should use it. Now in this case, the temperature is cold. This is a classic mistake here. So I hope you got my point. Let me just quickly summarize that. First of all, never use your variable and then declare it. Always do the opposite. Always declare it first and then use it. And again, the first parameter that you pass in here in the function is going to set into the first parameter of the definition. Very important. We'll be using it tons of times in the future as well. So make sure you keep an eye on that. Okay, and the declaration of the default parameter is pretty awesome and I like it quite a lot. In fact, I use it every single day now with the latest methods of the ES6 here. I hope you got this and you find this movie really interesting in here.